question. We are visiting scholars from China. We come CSUN to improve our teaching skills. So can you give me some advice on how to improve English teaching skills so we can do better at open English courses?
To improve teaching skills?
Yeah, for English.
Because in China we teach in Chinese. We want to open some for English classes. Can you give us some suggestions how to improve English teaching skills?
I can give you one. I do it in my classes because I need to improve their English skills as well. The very first day of class, I will tell the students that I'm going to use vocabulary they've probably never heard before. In other words, words that they have not experienced. And I make it a finite list. It's arbitrary, but I make it a finite list. I say there are 25 words I'm going to use this semester that if you learn how to use them and use them properly, people will think you're educated, even if you're not. And then I challenge them, almost like a scavenger hunt, I challenge them to figure out what those 25 words are during the course of the semester. And I'll tell you what that's evolved into. Currently, we now have a bunch of students who came to me after the first week of class and said, hey, would you put a forum up on Moodle, which is a discussion group on our learning management system? Would you put a forum up on Moodle so that the students, we, can dialogue and discuss and get consensus on what those 25 words are? I said, absolutely. So 3 days ago, I put up a forum on Moodle, and I'll be damned if there isn't about 20 entries already. Only had one lecture. There's already 20 entries from people trying to figure out what the first couple of words were that I used. Now, I think that beyond the cuteness of that, there is some real educational value to it. Because what they're going to have to do in trying to decide what those words are and the definitions of them and the syntax that is used around them, they're going to have to come to an appreciation for why those words would be unique to a course, in this case, in research methods and statistics, and why it would not be necessarily unique in other contexts. So what we do at the end of the semester is we have an award ceremony, and the persons that got the most of those 25 words right, as judged now by these entries in the forum, is going to be given some bonus points at the end of the semester. So there's a reward for it. It induces people to engage in it. But what I find and continue to be amazed by is that people will recognize the interactive component of this. Again, they're interacting with their peers. And consequently, while they're learning, they're also getting to know their peers. And so this forum has turned out to be a real boon. And I think it has some particular applicability for foreign language students or professors who are trying to get keywords across that may not translate into their language quite as appropriately as might be expected. By giving them this sort of exercise to get involved in, they not only integrate themselves into a peer network, but they also come out of it with newfound meaning for these words.
I walked in late and heard you talking about, Jerry talking about the changing student population. And I would mind if you would share with our colleagues here what you have done for that. Like Jerry teaches a class on Sunday. And so one of the things we were concerned about was would there be enough students for this Sunday class? And we found that there's been more than enough students, and it's been something that's been ongoing. And that if you just talk a little bit about how you started this Sunday class and how it's set up and how the response and the wait list that we have to get into that class.
What Herman's alluding to is that some years ago we came to a conclusion that there were some critical log jams in our curriculum that was precluding people from getting through the major in an expeditious way. So in 2003 or 4, I can't remember which now, I decided that I would try to do this where we combine 2 of our core courses together and see if we could do this on one longer term environment, in this case a weekend, I started on Saturday mornings. I had to bring them food because I didn't want them to fall asleep at 11 in the morning because they didn't have breakfast, and then go out and gorge on lunch and come back and fall asleep at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So I fed them some food after our first of 4 sessions. We had some trepidations about whether it would make or not. It did. It made in spades. During the time it was on Saturdays, I probably turned away an average of 30 or 40 students for this. And in assessing them on an exit interview, it was clear that everybody was there because they worked during the week. They couldn't take 2 classes like this on 4 nights, because each class has a lab, and work full-time. It was just not happening. So the popularity was clear. When we changed to a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday schedule, and Jolene imposed the requirement that 15% of the classes had to be on the weekends, meaning Friday or Saturday. Nobody had thought to include Sunday on the weekends, I guess. But anyway, 15% of the classes had to be on Friday and Saturday. We had a scheduling issue. In fact, I had a bet with Spiro Bowman, who was our old resource person who retired 2 years ago, that we would make it in spades. And in fact, we did make it in spades. We had way more than 15% of the classes on Friday and Saturday. But in doing so, our lab became quite crowded because we had to schedule some things on Saturday, and they were trying to move my class and my lab around. And I said, Herman, this won't work. I said, why don't we try this on Sunday? And he was a doubting Thomas, as was Stella. Harry was agnostic. He just turned his palms up and said, let's see what happens. And Stella said, Jerry, you know, I'm going to have to cancel this if you don't have more than 15 students. I said, oh, Stella, please. So we went out and did a survey, and 79% of the students that we surveyed in our classroom, and it was our methods class that did the survey, 79% of the students agreed that if there was a class that met their requirements offered on Sunday, they would take it. Well, 79% was enough for me, so we scheduled the thing on Sunday from 12 till 6, deferring to the morning for people's religious preferences. And sure enough, I turned 95 people away. So it's been quite an experience. We've taught it on Sunday for 2 years now, and I've had to limit the enrollment to 0 in pre-enrollment, so each person would have to contact me separately to make sure that they understood they had to be in both classes and get the permissions numbers from me directly. So what I've done is interview like typically 100 students to get them into my class, and then of course if there are any anomalies, I get to tell them why they can't get into the class. But it's been a lot of extra work, but I think it's done 2 things. One of the latent functions is that I get to make sure that everybody's had the requirements, are enrolled in all the classes, and it works for them and it works for me. But the second latent function that I find interesting is that before the class ever starts, I get to know my students. So when I walk in the first day, they're not strangers. I've at least had 3 or 4 emails with each one, if not direct meetings with each one. I know a lot about their background. I know what's driving them. I know why they're taking the class before I ever open my mouth the first day. And I think that's gone a very long way in helping to create the sense of community in the classroom that I was talking about earlier. But the function for the department is what I think Herman wants me to relate to. The function for the department is it's been a boon for people who get down to their senior year and said, oops, I haven't taken the prerequisites that are going to allow me to graduate this semester. And I don't know how to do it because our stat requirement is a prerequisite for our methods requirement. So if they don't start it in the fall, you can't get there from here. Well, this has allowed a lot of people to take the opportunity to satisfy both requirements in their last semester at school. And I can't tell you how many people have gotten the opportunity to graduate in June instead of having to come back to school and take another semester in the fall. So for that, we're eternally grateful.
I wonder if you might talk about the greatest learning experience you've had learning from a student or students.
Well, I did something about 5 years ago. I was teaching here full-time, and I decided I wanted to go back to the elementary classroom, which is completely crazy, and teach in the elementary classroom at the same time I'm teaching at the university. And I I ended up doing a professor in residence situation at Sepulveda Middle School. I taught for 4 hours at the middle school, 6th grade, English, language arts, and social studies, which is my specialty area. And that 2-year period was the greatest learning that I had, and kind of realization that even being out of the classroom a couple of years, everything, the context totally changes. So getting to know the students that are, you know, in this local area, the elementary, middle school students, and then pairing it with having my method students actually taking the course after my class, but involved in actually teaching in my class. So I had this kind of what I call 3-wing circus going on, where my method students would come and observe me teaching the methods that I taught them the week before with real students, and then having those students actually team teach with me in my classroom, and then seeing the reaction of the elementary, middle school students. So that was some intense learning. I had very little sleep that 5 years. I think I lost many, many brain cells in lack of sleep. But it was really great to see my method students, who normally I don't get to see out in the field. Sometimes you teach a group and then they go to somebody else and they get supervised by other people in the department. But it was really wonderful to see them in my classroom working with my students, and then having kind of this feedback loop of learning from them. And I learned a lot of interesting things about them. I learned that creativity is 90% of being a teacher. Some of the students came in with really creative ideas, which since then I've stole. Because you know, teaching, you kind of take something, oh, that's kind of cool, and then you make it your own. So that was huge for me. And every year I try to bring the classroom into my methods class to make sure that my current students have that experience with little ones, so that they know what it's really like to be out there, rather than saying theoretically, oh, this is how it works, and we're doing this really cool methodology right now, and you're all adults and pretend to be kids. No, you bring the kids into the classroom through video, through student work samples, and then they get really the taste of what it's like to teach them.
Language, that language barrier is at times when I communicate with students, whether it's in a group or especially in my own, in the office setting, that the depth in which an individual will know a material or theorist or have a grasp of what they want to communicate with, but the language barrier in which they're trying to write in English or communicate in English on paper or verbally seems to create the wall, the barrier in which they have the idea, but it's just to communicate it. And where I've had students come in and I've worked with them, and after spending an hour, half an hour to an hour with a student whose language is not English as a primary language, you realize that they know the material. They understand what the instructor is wanting from them, and it's just difficult for them to open up and express that. And it's the challenge, I think, is to, I have to say, I wish we had a better, part of me wishes we had a system or something in place that we could help students that have that language barrier, but be able to express what they really knew on paper. But it just takes an individual longer. And I think that long process in which trying to have them explain something, I think at times becomes frustrating for the individual, the student. And where I think over a period of time, after a while, they think they just want to give up, and realize you have to tell them, no, don't give up. This is, for me, it's almost, I look at them as, well, you're able to speak a second language, it's already a plus. I mean, so you're already halfway there.